let's check out this question from our viewer. Brett Baker asks, "What is our take on uh, we should be observing the Sabbath?" All right, so the Sabbath is in the Ten Commandments. It's one of the Ten Commandments, and this really perturbs me in a lot of ways. People act as though the Sabbath passed away. You get this with what are they called? The New Covenant or something. Is that it? NCT?
Yeah, New Covenant theology,
Yeah, New Covenant theology. Um,
progressive covenant
yeah,
theology,
yeah. Um,
which are
and so,
different.
okay, I'm just getting hip to this stuff, but even in America in general, even people that wouldn't know that they hold to those views or don't hold to those views, the first table of the law is very by the wayside. So the first commandment, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. You shall have no other God. So we sort of break that on a routine basis. We have a little bit of syncretism on our money and God we trust, which interestingly enough was added in the 50s to distinguish us from communism. Uh, you shall not make yourself an idol. We have the second commandment about images. Um, Lots of Jesus movies out there. So that's a debate that we're not getting into. We're just going down the list of ways we obliterate the first table. The third commandment, you shall not take the Lord your name in vain. Uh, we have a lot of televangelists who bandy about as Christ ministers and throw the name of Jesus around for improper means. And
Hmm.
anytime that we use the fact that we are Christians or bear Christ's name falsely or in vain, maybe we expect to get a good deal on a Honda because we know the salesman's a Christian and throw that around. That's using God's name in vain more so, and the televangelist especially, more so than saying GD or JC. And so that brings us down to the commandment in question, which is the keeping of the Sabbath. So, first, we must say that the Christian Sabbath is no longer Saturday, rather, it is Sunday, the first day of the week. And we see some evidence about that in the New Testament that the Lord's Day, as it's called in the book of Revelation, um, did move from Saturday to Sunday, the day of Jesus' resurrection. And now some people say that no, the Sabbath was only a sign for the Old Testament. It's the one and the only sign of the Mosaic covenant. And now that that old covenant has passed away, there is no more Sabbath. My reply to that would be if we look at the Ten Commandments, each one of them is something that is displays God's character and nature, and something that was woven into creation. Um, if you read in Exodus 29, it says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. It shall in it you shall not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your male or your female slave, or your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you. Verse 11 being the key verse here. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So, this seventh day of creation, the Sabbath, which, as I've already said, has been moved to the Lord's day on the first day of the week in the New Testament, in the New Covenant, is woven into creation. This commandment is not something that passed away. It's like murder. Murder didn't pass away because it's a new covenant, and all we have to do is love everyone. So if we love everyone, we can, disregard murder or disregard having idols. No, this is woven into creation because the reason that we have the seventh day rest is because God did the same thing when He created the world. So the Sabbath has been there from the beginning. The one who created the Sabbath is God. There may be some nuances that Jesus brings out in the New Testament to distinguish works of necessity, um, which I'm less familiar with the Old Testament, so those might most likely were there anyway,
I mean,
but I can't.
I'm saying I think he's drawing upon Old Testament to show
Right,
that you have acts of mercy and acts of necessity, in
right,
which much be. Because if you think about it, the priests have to work on the Sabbath day,
right,
regardless.
exactly,
So, um, I would say Jesus is pulling Old Testament.
right.
That
'Cause
you
that's
save, because you even see it like those save livestock. Oh, but you can't, smash some wheat in your hands and eat it.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, then and that makes sense to me because he does that with all the other commandments as well. Um, so yeah, uh, the Sabbath day, should we observe it? Yes. Do we just take a day off to loaf and watch football? I don't think that's what is meant by keeping the Sabbath. Further, if you want to keep the fourth commandment, you need to remember that part of the fourth commandment is you shall work 6 days and do all your work. So if you're not working Monday through Saturday, and then all of a sudden Sunday comes around and someone says, "Hey, can you do your chores?" and you sat for 6 days playing video games, you're not keeping the commandment by saying, "No, I got to meditate on my scriptures today." That's the end of my hot take. So your
Okay,
turn, Mike.
my turn on the hot take. So I do not go as far. This is a topic I've thought a lot about, and this is where I currently stand. Um, so I am not completely convinced that the Sabbath, kind of in how they held it in the Old Testament, exactly comes into the New. Now, with that said, I do think there are some very specific commands given in the New Testament which direct our activities on the Lord's Day. As you mentioned, we see that the early church in Acts gathers on the Lord's Day for preaching and for teaching. Within that is also prayer and the sacraments or the ordinances, how you want to define that. We see in Hebrews the command to not forsake the assembling of one another, but to encourage each other with love, to encourage each other with faith and with hope. Get that in Hebrews chapter 10. Um, so there, so kind of where I stand now is that there should be a priority to and intentionality about coming together with the saints on the Sunday when your church has determined that the saints belonging to that church come together to worship God. And that we are to, as believers, come together. And that should be the focus. That is, you shouldn't be doing things that's going to conflict with your ability to come to church. Now, we've mentioned exceptions of with mercy or even
Right,
with necessities. So a cop, a nurse, and a politician, if they need to in times of crisis, um there are those exceptions. But those are the exceptions and not the rules.
right.
So here's a hot take. You ready? If your son has a baseball game on Sundays and it's going to be every Sunday, you shouldn't do it.
Mm,
You shouldn't. The church, the more I think about the church and the importance of gathering together, that we are strengthened by each other. We are encouraged with one another. We can bear each other's burdens. We can help each other up. That God has given us a wonderful community to join and to be part of, to be refreshed and to renew and to gather together as we fight in this life against the sin, against our own sin, and against the devil and the demons and all the spiritual warfare has to offer. And so there should be this high priority that you are intentional about it and that
Right.
you are ready to come and to worship. Um, Now, practically, or how I do it, I try to be more intentional with that day with just spiritual stuff in general, kind of keeping um, within what the 6989 kind of talks about and what the Westminster does in the same way. But I'm not quite, you could say, like full Sabbatarian
Yeah. Yeah.
in that. But I do think the New Testament is very clear on the aspect of gathering together. And that day is the first. Sorry, Seventh day Adventist, you're wrong. It's the eighth day. It's the day of recreation. It's the day that Christ rose again. And we celebrate it in that way.
So you just sat in judgment on the Seventh Day Adventist, and their answer to you is, therefore, no one is to act as your judge in regard to food and drink, and in respect to a festival or new moon or a Sabbath day, things which were mere shadow of a Christ which is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. So I'm a Seventh Day Adventist, and you're acting as my judge according to this Sabbath day. What do you have to say about that, Mike?
But that's
I
what the
feel
New
condemned.
Testament teaches.
Yeah.
And the New
So
Testament example is that Christians gathered on the first day. They didn't gather on the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath day, the seventh day. No, they came. So the scripture is clear about when they come and when they gathered. And I think what Paul is talking about here is not the Christian Sabbath, but the Sabbath day. That is, Christians are not required to hold to the Sabbath day as the law explicitly says.
right,
On the seventh day to rest. So there is a difference in
right,
the Sabbath and the festivals and the weeks and food and all of that. So I think Paul is just talking about that Christians are no longer enslaved to the Mosaic covenant, that we have been freed from that covenant.
right,
Now, that doesn't mean, that parts have not come across or come over. We see even Paul talks about how the law is good and it's for the Christian's benefit to understand the law and to abide by it. And that the law, as Jesus taught, is summed up and to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so I think that's what Paul is really diving onto here in Colossians 2:16 and 17 as you slyly sneak in Ricky's question.
yeah. I think that you answered well. I think that what we have here, since the Sabbath day is tucked in with new moon festivals, um, and other typological things, I think what we have is identifying the ceremonial aspects of it. But I don't know. I would say that there's something that's it's part of the Ten Commandments. So there's got to be a moral aspect as well to resting on the seventh, or as we're saying, the eighth day. Would you say so too? Would you say that this is distinguishing the ceremonial from the moral aspects, or is that even a helpful way of saying it?
Yeah, I think the aspect to pull from it is a day set aside by God to kind of for worship and what you see.
Yeah.
I think that's the principle of the command.
Okay.
Uh, and you see that, I mean, for there to even be this idea of a Christian Sabbath, it's not exactly, I mean, you're already changing the day of the week. So there has to be
Right.
kind of some with it. Um,
Right.
and when we understand this set aside, I do think there is, I mean, if someone continually neglects the gathering of the body, um, not because of works of necessity, kind of would be the most common aspect, or the works of mercy, if that's what part of your job is talking about, then I do think there's a claim to church discipline, because they are breaking other commands by neglecting the gathering.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think maybe in a moral sense, you see that played out in their continued disregard for the gathering of the church.
Right.